Monday night, I tweeted the following. Do you ever get the feeling the big plan has got away from the baddies, but they can't stop it and they really don't know what to do and they're bricking it? Okay. So I put that out, I don't know, it was about 8 o'clock last night or something. And the last time I checked, which was about 10 minutes ago, it had nudging towards 300,000 views. Now, I mean, I know, whatever. How does one interpret those numbers? I don't know, but it's a big number. And I suspect it'll keep going up for a little while. Yeah, and because it attracted more attention than most of the stuff I post, I thought it was like a wet finger in the air. I thought, is that maybe, have I detected an air current there? And I mean, as with a lot of the stuff that I put out there, it was partly tongue-in-cheek. You know, God forbid anyone should think that everything I put on Twitter is serious. But anyway, this was partly tongue-in-cheek. And I say that because I absolutely believe that part of turning back the dark tide that has sort of built up over our heads like a tsunami, part of turning it back will draw its power from ridicule. And you're poking fun at the pomposity of those who would do us harm. You know, the elite, the parasite class, the psychos, the totalitarians, whatever you want to call that narrow strip of humanity with all the money and power and with zero regard for their fellow human beings, they take themselves very, very seriously. I'm talking about Davos man and woman and their ilk, the World Economic Forum types, the World Health Organization types. It's the puppet politicians of the left, of the right, of the centre, all over the world. The CEOs of transnational corporations, you know, the Vanguard, BlackRock, State Streets and the rest. Heads of state, God, they're dreadful. Pompous arses, the lot of them. They define, as far as it's required, the very notion of not being able to take a joke or not being able to take a joke at their expense. So it's by laughing at them and not taking them seriously, at least not all of the time, never forgetting their frailties and weaknesses, even while brutally aware of all the death and destruction they are absolutely causing and will cause if they can get away with it. It's by remembering that they are simultaneously psychopathically, sociopathically dangerous and also ludicrous and laughable. Hold those two thoughts in your head at one time and we'll beat them. So, back to my tweet. And I did say tweet because Elon Musk needs laughed at like all the rest of them. And he's kidding himself if he thinks anyone really thinks Twitter is now called X. Yeah, people call it X for his benefit, you know. I don't know, but you just don't want to hurt his feelings. But it's Twitter, and I tweeted on Twitter. Anyway, there's undeniably a plan. You know, when I talk about, the big plan, there's undeniably a plan towards centralised control of the many by the few. Okay? You call that plan what you will as well. You call it the inevitable end game of capitalism and consumerism and the pursuit of profit, if you like. If that suits you, call it the Napoleon complex. Call it communism, as many do. Call it fascism. Stakeholder capitalism. Who you kidding, wee Klaus? You know, he was handpicked by, what's his name? Henry Kissinger. I think he was doing something. I think his research was funded by the CIA at that point when Henry Kissinger came across him. Anyway, that's stuff for another conversation on another day. So call the plan appetite for destruction, or call it the age-old attractions of despotism that always appeals to the same sort of people, millennia after millennia. It doesn't matter, because all roads lead to Rome, and the end game is control. Total control of wealth, of power, so that they can indulge their kinks, however hideous and vile and frankly unthinkable and unforgivable kinks. View it through whichever prism or lens makes sense to you. But I say there's intent out there in the minds and deeds of the psychos. Maybe it's one intention. Maybe they've all got it together. Like the folk on Star Trek, all wearing the same uniform, working for the same federation. Maybe not. Maybe we're dealing with mixed, competing intentions held by competing entities. But the intention is to get and maintain the upper hand with the rest of us. There's a handful of them, and there's 8 billion of us, and they want control of us. Some people say it's a relatively new plan and new baddies. Like the product maybe of, let's say, the first half of the 20th century, maybe. Others say it's a very old plan. Centuries old, if not millennia. As old as the Bible, as old as humanity, whatever benchmark you want to, whatever metric you want to use for measuring age. But anyway, I shrug my shoulders, because old or young, it's there now. And it's the weight of a yoke pressing down on all of our shoulders. We're being crushed by something. The something is real, whatever you want to call it, however you visualize it. So last night, I tweeted and I asked the question whether others like me, who think there's a plan, also think that the plan has slipped from the control of the planners. Like Mickey Mouse, when he loses control of all the mops and buckets in Fantasia, if you're old enough to remember Fantasia. I think it has. And I think it slipped, as it were. Slipped in a way that really, really matters once the unintended effect of the internet gained the momentum that it has now. Somehow or other, because they're stupid clever, they're not clever. Somehow or other, it didn't occur to anyone in the headquarters of the big plan to contemplate the consequences of millions of people being able to share ideas and data 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. And all of that thinking, talking and sharing over a few decades has had the effect we're seeing now. So that all at once, really, the propaganda of the press, the traditional media that was once the sole source of news for most people, it's rendered powerless. It's a shadow, a worn out shadow of the thing it ever was. The press is powerless as far as those on the internet are concerned. By now, millions of people are talking all the time about all sorts. They're talking about and taking it for granted. They're not speculating. They're just, this is the stock in trade, that the big state is in bed with organised crime. That our elected representatives are the puppets of criminals. We talk about how our financial systems, our entire economies are Ponzi schemes. They're not like Ponzi schemes. They're actual Ponzi schemes. We talk about how forever war is key to how the rich stay rich and get richer. Always has been, always will be. We talk about how the climate crisis, in scare quotes, is a hoax. We talk about the lethal consequences of lockdowns and mandated medical interventions involving experimental cocktails. About central bank digital currencies and digital IDs and social credit systems, and about how all of that, the 15-minute ghettos and all the rest of it, how all of that comes together to form an electronic gulag, one worldwide gulag archipelago of the sort that Alexander Solzhenitsyn warned about in A Different World. Or maybe it's the same world. Millions of people are talking all the time about all of this. And on account of all that conversation, millions of us have noticed what was always there to be noticed, the elephant in the room, that it's all part of a plan to enslave humanity and drive us into digital feudalism. We see the fakery, the pantomime, the constant lying, the constant obfuscation and attempts at distraction, so worn out. I say again, don't come at me saying, that I'm not accepting how much damage has been done, because I do and I will. But there's no denying how murderous it all is. All through the 20th century, millions upon millions of people were sacrificed knowingly. by those in pursuit of wealth and control. Now here we are in the third decade of the 21st century, and the corpses keep piling up. Right now there's 600,000 dead in Ukraine. For what? For somebody else's bank account. In Gaza, it's piles of babies and their mothers. Mass graves. It's as ugly as it gets. So I know that. In a very real sense, it's absolutely no laughing matter. It's the greatest crime or crimes yet perpetrated against humanity. We're living through it, looking on at it. But an important part of seeing the perpetrators for what they are lies in ridiculing them at the same time. You know, that they have lost control is laid bare by how fast and how recklessly the baddies are working together. Or maybe they are in mutually antagonistic groups, all fighting for the same prize. Who knows? But you can tell they've lost control because of how desperately they're working. Entire nations are being put under deliberately concocted, unbearable pressure. You're flooded with immigrants, people on the move, to such an extent that in one Western country after another, you know, one Western capital after another, the indigenous populations are being overwhelmed. And the people on the move, the migrants, they're pawns in play, moved around the board in their millions by those with so much to gain from the chaos and confusion. Chaos and confusion inflicted upon people who in the main just want to live their lives in peace. You know, we're cynically set against each other. Black against white against brown. Christian against Muslim against Jew. The big plan is as obvious as it's ugly. A plan for total control. But I say again that it's got away from them. Like a runaway train, it's got away from them. But we're all aboard it together, goodies and baddies. We're all travelling on the same train. We're all afloat aboard the same big ship. We're all on one planet. You know, whatever. And now it's out of their control and they don't know what to do about that, except to just do more and more of the same, faster and faster. I mean, I'm already seeing comments coming back on the thing I put out on Twitter. You know, people saying, no, we haven't made so much as a dent in their plans. They're totally on it. We're just flailing about, drumming our tiny fists on their mighty chests. It's all going according to the plan. But I dispute that because these are people who've worked in the shadows and sought to pull the wool over eyes for an unspecified period of time, but longer than any of us have been alive. And I refuse to accept that being suddenly cast into the bright light was ever their plan. They're operating now exposed and out in the open, but I think they're very uncomfortable, and that is because they've lost control of the narrative. You know, that they are not accustomed to working that way. People that work in the shadows don't like to suddenly be on stage under the bright lights because it's harder to do things up front. You know, everybody can sing in the shower with the lights off. It's quite a different game to stand on stage and do it. But it's out of control. You're close as they got. Give the devil his due, but they didn't get the keystone of the arch into place. The final piece that would have locked it in before any of us knew what was going on. They didn't manage that. People know about programmable money, you know, central bank digital currencies, which are, it's not money at all. That takes away transaction, and that means that when you want something, you have to, every time you seek to transact, you're basically saying, please, may I have permission to do the following? And in real time, in the moment, a decision is made. No, you can't. Can I put petrol in my car? Nope. Can I buy a steak? Nope. Can I buy a ticket for that plane? Nope. No negotiation. You can't draw the money out and do it some other way. Okay, so, but people know. We talk about this openly. People know the scamdemic, plandemic, whatever, COVID 1984, whatever you want to call it, was more of their doing for the same reason. And the same people that know that didn't fall for it the last time won't fall for the next one. no matter how hysterical the next one is, we will see the zombie, bird, monkeypox, spiders from Mars, Ebola, flu for precisely what it is, and won't take the next round of whatever gene therapies or whatever it is they roll out, whatever magic beans they bring out. Nobody's going to swallow them. Not those people that have already seen through it. Just as the internet and nuclear weapons weren't at the disposal of the big planners when the plan was hatched, neither was the technology for, biological weapons. So whatever they try to frighten 8 billion people with next, whatever films they release of people seeming to fall down dead in the street, like they did with COVID, you can be sure of one thing: those with the power and control and the bank accounts and the nice houses, always at sea level. You notice that one? The people that tell us that the sea levels are rising, Barack Obama and the rest of them, Bill Gates, they've all got multi-million-pound mansions on the beach. They're not so very worried about the sea level rise. But you can be sure that, as well as everything else, they're not going to put into the air of this one planet where they also live anything that might make them ill. They're just not going to do that. They'll put out fake propaganda about something that's not real, but they will not release into the atmosphere something that they might catch. The only thing that's airborne is fear. But courtesy of the internet, too many people know what to be afraid of and what to ridicule as hoaxes and nonsense. So, I say again, I don't have a crystal ball. I don't know what happens next. But I do know, or I'm as certain as I can be, that the psychos and the control freaks have ended up with a tiger by the tail. Or if you prefer, they're aboard a train with no brakes, along with the rest of us. We can see them clearly now. They've revealed themselves completely, unintentionally. They'll be exposed by the internet as much as by anything else. We know that they never followed any science. They didn't even follow common sense. 6 feet apart, magic arrows on the floors of supermarkets, chains on the kids' swings, getting arrested for jogging on the beach. What a lot of nonsense. The pandemic was no such thing. The injectables were useless at best and lethal for some at worst. The green agenda, Agenda 2030 and all that, it's nonsense. There's nothing green about any of it. There's nothing green about solar panels. There's nothing green about wind turbines. There's nothing green about electric vehicles. It's not green, it's greed with a D. The war in Ukraine isn't and never was about democracy. It was about money. It was about NATO poking the Russian bear on behalf of a United States of America that sees it's lost control as well. But we can see them and we see what they're about. They've lost control. But at least we can see them as the little men they are, behind the curtain, shouting through a loud hailer. They've lost control. And they've realised they're as much at risk from what they've set in motion as the rest of us. If any of us are in danger of being torn apart, so are they. And they're scared. They are bricking it. Scared people do crazy things, and so we have to keep watching them. But do you know what? It's my suspicion that in the end, we'll not just have to save ourselves from them. We're going to end up having to save these idiots from themselves.